Teacher, observe. The custodian is once again providing food to that famished child, a pupil called out derisively across the school grounds. The elderly man remained silent, merely offering a smile and departing after depositing the sandwich. A week thereafter, the entire school became motionless as a group of Marines in formation entered through the gates, each one pausing to salute him with military exactitude. Who was this unassuming boy? And for what reason did a simple janitor garner such profound appreciation from the armed forces? James Holler, aged 68, had previously served as a transport specialist with the United States Marine Corps during the concluding years of the Vietnam War. His time-worn hands now manipulated brooms instead of steering mechanisms, his military attire replaced by the gray overalls of Pinewood Elementary in rural Arkansas. Following his discharge, he seldom spoke of his history. He resided modestly in a small flat 6 blocks from the educational institution, commuting to his employment daily irrespective of the weather, carrying an unpretentious lunch container and acknowledging every student with the same affable smile. The educators held James in high regard. He would arrive before others to ensure pathways were free of snow in winter and cleared of leaves in autumn. His presence was so dependable that if James was not in the corridor at precisely 6:45 a.m., the principal would verify his well-being. Few were aware of James's distinctive practice. Each morning, he would reserve a part of his midday meal, sometimes a sandwich, at other times fruit or a homemade biscuit, and place it on the stone seats situated in the corner of the East Recreation area. He never alluded to it, and most staff members had learned to refrain from inquiring. That Tuesday morning commenced as any other. James arrived at 6:30, unlocked the utility closet, and started his usual tasks. By 7:15, he had situated himself near the stone seat, lunch sack in hand. A cluster of 5th grade pupils had assembled close to the basketball court, more boisterous than typical as they awaited the initial bell. One of them noticed James and nudged his companions. Teacher, observe. The custodian is providing food to that famished child again. The boy exclaimed loudly enough for everyone in the vicinity to hear. Several students chuckled. Miss Parker, the 4th grade instructor on morning supervision, glanced up from her clipboard with a disapproving frown. She took a step towards the group, unsure of how to address the situation. James merely smiled, the same gentle expression he displayed when cleaning up spilled milk or repairing a jam blocker. He nodded courteously to Ms. Parker, then stooped to deposit a meticulously wrapped sandwich and a bottle of water on the seat. Subsequently, he turned and departed without a word, propelling his cleaning trolley towards the gymnasium. The recipient of James's daily provision was Lucas, a 9-year-old 4th grade student with serious eyes and attire that showed signs of wear. His parents had recently separated, leading to numerous relocations and changes in schools. While other children's lunch containers were filled with carefully made meals, Lucas usually possessed only a few dry crackers in his pocket. Lucas never requested anything. He never voiced dissatisfaction. He merely occupied a seat at the edge of the classroom, completed his assignments with diligence, and tried to avoid notice. When the lunch bell sounded, he would frequently assert that he was not hungry or had left his meal at home. For 3 months since Lucas's enrollment at Pinewood, James had discreetly made sure the boy never endured an entire day without sustenance. No words passed between them, only food left on a bench and the slight nod Lucas would offer when he believed no one was observing. Miss Parker had, naturally, observed this, as had Principal Winters. Yet, they held James in sufficient esteem not to meddle with what appeared to be a personal understanding between a benevolent elderly man and a child requiring more than just scholastic assistance. What none of them comprehended was that James's straightforward act of sharing his meal would soon bring the entire school to a halt. If you believe a kind look and a modest meal can rescue a child, remain with us. Nobody gave much thought to the fact that Lucas invariably reached school early, whereas most pupils hurried in just prior to the bell. Lucas could be seen seated on the steps as early as 7 a.m., irrespective of the weather, waiting quietly with a well-worn book in his lap. James was consistently the first to acknowledge him. "Did you sleep soundly, young one?" he would inquire while sweeping the entrance. Lucas never responded verbally, offering merely a slight nod or shake of his head. Yet, an expression in the boy's eyes hinted that this brief moment of recognition held more significance than the casual query suggested. The morning following the incident on the playground, Lucas deviated from their established routine. Instead of retrieving the food and withdrawing to his usual spot, he neared the maintenance room during his lunch break. Slipping a folded sheet of paper beneath the door, he quickly departed before anyone could observe him. James discovered the note upon his return from repairing a dripping water fountain. Penned in neat, childlike script were words that caused the old man's hands to shake. "Thank you for the sandwiches. My dad was a Marine, too. I don't know if he's alive anymore, but you remind me of him." James sat down heavily on his metal stool, his eyes abruptly becoming moist. Since Vietnam, he had disciplined himself to suppress emotion, but this simple message from a child who had never spoken to him directly penetrated decades of practiced impassivity. The subsequent morning, James prepared with exceptional diligence. Instead of his customary leftover sandwich, he packed fresh turkey on homemade bread and apple polish to a gleam and 2 chocolate chip cookies still warm from his early morning baking. The food was enveloped in proper wax paper rather than repurposed plastic bags. Lucas discovered the enhanced lunch in its usual location. Something about the meticulousness of its preparation caused the boy's eyes to well with tears. He consumed every last crumb. For the remainder of the week, their ritual persisted with a subtle alteration. Now, Lucas would offer a small wave upon spotting James across the schoolyard. James would touch his brow in a gesture that was part salute, part tip of an imaginary hat. Still no words, but a connection was deepening beyond their silent exchanges. What no one at Pinewood Elementary comprehended was how those simple meals were satisfying more than just a physical requirement. For Lucas, they symbolized the soul stability in a life that had recently been thrown into disarray. Then Monday morning arrived. The day commenced uneventfully. Pupils arrived, classes gathered, and the usual hum of learning permeated the corridors. James was addressing a persistent mark in the cafeteria when the office intercom emitted a crackle. "Mr. Holler, kindly proceed to the main entrance." James wiped his hands on a cloth, perplexed. In his 15 years at Pinewood, he had seldom been called for during school hours. As he neared the main doors, he observed an uncharacteristic quietude. Pupils and educators alike stood motionless near windows, their faces displaying a mix of bewilderment and admiration. Outside, a convoy of 4 black SUVs bearing government license plates had stopped in the emergency vehicle lane. Positioned in impeccable formation before the school entrance were 12 Marines in dress blue uniforms, their bearing faultless, their expressions grave. James halted midway down the corridor, his heart abruptly quickening with an instinctive response he had not experienced in decades. Something about the exactness of their arrangement, the shine of brass buttons in the morning sunlight, instantly transported him to a different era, a different existence. The officer in charge, a captain judging by his insignia, noticed James through the glass doors and spoke softly to his men. As one, they shifted to a position of attention. Principal Winters approached James, her expression one of bafflement. "Are you aware of the reason for this?" Before James could reply, the captain entered the building, removed his cap, and addressed the principal with formal politeness. "Ma'am, I am Captain Rodriguez with the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. We are here to convey our appreciation to the individual who has been providing care for Sergeant Jackson's son." James stayed rooted to the spot, the cleaning cloth still grasped in his hand. "Sergeant Nathan Jackson perished in combat during our deployment to Fallujah," the captain went on. "Prior to his ultimate mission, he extracted a promise from us that, should anything befall him, we would look after his son. It required some time for us to find the boy after his mother moved, but we recently obtained information that someone here has been attending to him." Principal Winters turned to James, comprehension dawning in her eyes. "That would be Mr. Holler, our maintenance supervisor." The captain observed James, noting the upright posture that years of civilian life had not diminished. "Were you a Marine?" James nodded once, his voice regaining composure despite his surprise. "Transport Division, 71 to 75. "Then you comprehend the significance of Marines making a promise to one of their own," Captain Rodriguez stated. "Sergeant Jackson saved many of our lives. We are here to honor his memory by expressing gratitude to the man who has been caring for his son when we were unable to." The reality of the situation gradually became clear to James. The quiet boy with melancholic eyes, Lucas, was the son of a deceased Marine. Every sandwich he had shared was not merely feeding a hungry child, it was fulfilling a sacred duty to a fellow serviceman he had never encountered. Have you ever observed an everyday act of kindness culminate in a moment that brought an entire community to a halt? Share an instance when you witnessed goodness expand into something far greater. The ensuing revelation transformed a straightforward act of kindness into something considerably more significant. Lucas Jackson was, in fact, the son of Sergeant Nathan Jackson, yet the connection extended further than anyone could have foreseen. Nathan had not been merely any Marine, he had served in the identical transport unit that James had assisted in founding 4 decades prior. Though separated by years, they had worn the same insignia, traversed the same routes, and adhered to the same procedures that James had helped institute during his period of service. Nathan had perished during a civilian evacuation mission, utilizing his vehicle to protect refugee families from enemy assault. He had died as he had lived, behind the wheel, guaranteeing others reached safety. Lucas's mother, Ellen, overwhelmed by her husband's demise and contending with financial difficulties, had relocated them numerous times over the past year. Their move to Pinewood had not been fortuitous. It was the final location Nathan had mentioned in his last letter home. If anything should happen to me, he had penned, take Lucas to Pinewood. There are good people there who understand what it means to serve. Ellen had not grasped the importance of the place, only that it had held significance for Nathan. Overcome by sorrow and the difficulties of raising a child alone, she had discreetly submitted an application to the Veterans Affairs Office requesting assistance while keeping her son's link to a fallen hero confidential even from Lucas himself. It was through these documents that Nathan's former unit had ultimately found them. Upon learning that Lucas was enrolled at Pinewood Elementary, they had made quiet inquiries regarding the boy's situation. A school secretary had remarked about the janitor who makes sure he eats, never anticipating her casual statement would initiate today's events. As the morning's unexpected events transpired, students and educators assembled in the main corridor, observing in stunned quietude. Captain Rodriguez elucidated the circumstances to Principal Winters, who promptly halted regular lessons and gathered everyone in the gymnasium. The Marines arranged themselves in a line at the doorway, each one pausing to execute a formal salute to James as he entered, still clad in his work attire, entirely unprepared for such an observance. Lucas was seated in the foremost row, his eyes wide with bewilderment and amazement. Captain Rodriguez spoke to the assembly, his voice resonating clearly through the hushed area. 40 years ago, Corporal James Holler rescued 16 Marines during the final evacuation of Saigon. His swift judgment and exceptional driving abilities enabled him to traverse terrain that others considered unnavigable. Without official directives, he re-entered the hazardous zone 3 times to retrieve stranded personnel. James gazed at the floor, uneasy with the attention he had dedicated decades to eluding. What many of you are unaware of, the captain proceeded, is that Corporal Holler established the training protocols still employed by Marine transport divisions today. Those very protocols guided Sergeant Jackson's actions during his ultimate mission. Captain Rodriguez turned to Lucas. Your father emulated the example of the very man who has been discreetly assisting you these past months. 2 Marines, linked across time by the same dedication to never abandoning anyone. The connection was almost too perfect to be coincidental, as if the universe had orchestrated a full-circle moment of silent reciprocity, the son of a fallen Marine being cared for by the very man who had trained his father's unit. Neither aware of their connection, Ellen Jackson, Lucas's mother, had been invited to the ceremony without prior knowledge of its nature. She stood at the rear of the gymnasium, tears flowing down her face, as she at last comprehended why her deceased husband had been so adamant about Pinewood. Nathan used to recount tales of old Holler's regulations, she later explained to the principal. I never established the link. He asserted they weren't merely about driving. They pertained to life. Always ascertain who is being left behind. That was the primary rule. Following the formal presentation, Captain Rodriguez handed James a shadow box containing Sergeant Jackson's unit insignia, service decorations, and a photograph of his team. In the background of the image, barely discernible on a wall, was a faded poster detailing transport guidelines, Holler's rules for getting home alive. Sergeant Jackson carried this photograph with him always, the captain clarified. He said it reminded him of what was most important. Lucas sneered with hesitation, looking from the photograph to James with newfound comprehension. You were acquainted with my dad. James knelt to the boy's level, his knees protesting the action. Not directly, son. But in the Marines, we are all interconnected. Your father followed the same path as I did, merely at a different time. Mom said he was courageous, Lucas offered softly. The most courageous, James affirmed. Drivers always are. We venture where others will not, to ensure no one is left behind. When Lucas's mother finally navigated through the crowd to her son's side, her face mirrored a multifaceted array of feelings. Sorrow freshly rekindled, appreciation beyond expression, and a touch of self-consciousness. I ought to have informed you who was assisting him, she addressed James. I simply was unaware. I have been so overwhelmed. James shook his head. No explanations are required, ma'am. A Marine's family is everyone's responsibility. The ceremony concluded with an announcement that astounded both James and the Jackson family. The Marine Corps had founded a scholarship fund in Sergeant Jackson's name, guaranteeing Lucas's education would be entirely financed through college. Furthermore, a veteran support organization had organized housing aid for Ellen and Lucas, a small yet well-kept residence just 2 blocks from Pinewood Elementary. We look after our own, Captain Rodriguez stated plainly, even if it requires some time to locate them. As the formal events drew to a close and students started to head back to their classrooms, media personnel who had gotten wind of the narrative arrived at the school. James promptly withdrew to his maintenance room, uneasy with the attention. Principal Winters found him there, systematically arranging his tools as though nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. They wish to interview you, she remarked gently. James shook his head. Not my preference. Never was. You have been employed here for 15 years, and I was unaware you were a decorated Marine. James continued organizing wrenches by size. Never perceived a necessity to disclose it. The war concluded long ago. Yet your actions, both then and now, merit acknowledgement. He finally raised his gaze, his expression contemplative. Acknowledgement is not the reason we undertake actions, Ms. Winters. Not the significant ones, at any rate. The principal observed this man she believed she had known, this quiet custodian who had covertly been a hero on 2 occasions. Why then did you assist Lucas? You could not have known the identity of his father. James's weathered countenance softened. Noticed him that initial day seated alone. No lunch. Too proud to admit his hunger. Certain things one simply recognizes after experiencing enough of the world. He paused, then added softly, no child should ever feel forgotten. The narrative circulated throughout the locality and further afield. Local ex-servicemen visited the school to shake James's hand. Former Marines from his old unit telephoned from various parts of the country, recounting tales of Holler's rules, which were still being imparted to new recruits. Throughout all this, James adhered to his routine, arriving early, working with diligence, and continuing to leave food for Lucas on the stone bench, although now they would frequently sit together to share it. One journalist managed to approach James as he was departing from school. How does it feel to be acclaimed as a hero? She inquired, her microphone extended. James contemplated the question with care. I am not the hero in this account, he replied at last. Nathan Jackson is. I merely acted as any of us would do, noticed a hungry child. With that, he resumed his walk homeward, leaving the reporter with a response far more profound than she had anticipated. Type respect. If you have ever encountered someone who sought no praise yet received the gratitude of an entire team years later. From that day onward, no one at Pinewood Elementary referred to James merely as the janitor. Students and staff alike addressed him as Mr. Holler, the school's unassuming protector. The stone bench where James had deposited countless meals evolved into an informal memorial. The Parent-Teacher Association installed a small bronze plaque nearby, inscribed with, "Here, a man who said nothing made an entire battalion of Marines stand at attention." The plaque served as an educational tool for teachers discussing civic responsibility and moral fiber. "Sometimes the greatest heroes are the most unassuming among us," Ms. Parker would inform her pupils. "They do not wear capes or desire accolades. They simply perceive needs and address them." Lucas thrived in the subsequent weeks. The reserved, somber child gradually transformed into a boy who smiled more readily and engaged in classroom discussions. His academic performance improved, and for the first time he joined the school's science club. Each morning, Lucas would arrive early to assist James with simple chores, holding open refuse bags, wiping down lunch tables, or arranging the tool shelf. No one had assigned him this task. It was an understanding they had reached independently. James continued to prepare extra food, but now they shared their meals together on the bench, sometimes in amiable quietude, other times with Lucas describing his classroom learning or posing questions about mechanical issues that intrigued him. "How does a transmission function?" Lucas inquired one morning while sharing ham sandwiches. James illustrated the fundamental concepts in the dust with a stick, his explanations lucid and patient. These unplanned lessons frequently attracted other inquisitive students, to the point where James's lunch break occasionally took on the character of an informal class in practical mechanics. The Marines did not neglect their commitment either. Members of Sergeant Jackson's unit established a rotation, with someone visiting Pinewood each month to check on Lucas and his mother. They assisted with household repairs, provided transportation for Ellen to job interviews until she found stable work, and made sure Lucas had chances to connect with his father's legacy in positive ways. Captain Rodriguez came back for the school's Veterans Day observance, where James, despite his initial hesitation, was convinced to stand with other local veterans. The photograph of James and Lucas together, both wearing Marine Corps caps that were slightly too large, became the emblem of a regional veterans support program. Ellen Jackson found solace through her newfound ties to the Marine community. "For the first year after Nathan passed, I kept everything related to his service locked away," she confided to James during a Sunday dinner at his apartment, now a monthly custom. "I believed it would be simpler for Lucas not to know too much. I was mistaken." James nodded with understanding. "Grief compels us to do peculiar things, but children require truth, delivered gently." "You provided him with more than just food," Ellen stated. "You gave him a link to his father without even realizing it." Perhaps the most notable transformation occurred within James himself. The solitary individual who had navigated life quietly, bearing the burden of his experiences, started to impart more of his wisdom. At the principal's suggestion, he created a basic vehicle maintenance elective for middle school students, teaching them practical skills while subtly instilling the values that had shaped his existence: thoroughness, accountability, and attentiveness to those who might require assistance. 6 months following the Marines' visit, James received an official communication from the Marine Corps Commandant, informing him that Holler's rules had been formally integrated into the training curriculum for all transport divisions. His straightforward, practical directives, conceived amidst the disarray of wartime exigency and honed through years of practice, would now influence generations of Marines yet to come. When questioned about his feelings regarding this honor, James responded in his typical manner: "They were never truly my rules. Just common sense principles one learns when people's lives are contingent upon your driving. Inspect your vehicle. Observe the road ahead. Remember who is accompanying you." On the 1-year anniversary of what students now referred to as Marine Day, a small ceremony was conducted to dedicate a newly created memorial garden at the edge of the schoolyard. At its heart stood the original stone bench, now flanked by a flagpole displaying both the American flag and the Marine Corps standard. During the dedication, Lucas, now more self-assured and a full head taller, stood beside James as the garden was officially named the Jackson Holler Friendship Garden. Two Marines who never met, Principal Winters explained to the assembled students, connected by duty, honor, and a simple act of kindness that reminds us all. Heroism often looks like an ordinary person doing what's right when no one is watching. James continues his duties at Pinewood Elementary, still arriving before sunrise and departing after dusk, still maintaining the premises with exacting diligence. His daily schedule remains largely unaltered, save for a single modification. He now shares his midday meal not only with Lucas but with any pupil requiring companionship or a listening ear. The unassuming stone seat has evolved into a place where children experiencing isolation or difficulties naturally congregate. Without ostentation or a formal initiative, James has established an unseen support system for the school's most at-risk students, identified not through official documentation or referrals, but through the quiet observation of a man who comprehends that hunger manifests in various forms, and not all can be appeased with sustenance. When questioned by a visiting educational consultant regarding his intervention approach with at-risk students, James provided a response that was subsequently displayed on the staff room wall. "I just figure everybody's fighting a battle we can't see. A sandwich and a moment of peace might not fix it, but it lets them know they're not fighting alone." Have you ever witnessed someone performing acts of kindness not for recognition, only to be remembered by an entire generation?